Jesus, please don't be mad. I know that it makes you sad. When I simply
Welcome to
don't
Faiths of
obey.
Appalachia, hidden stories of faith and values. My name is Rob Music. I'm a chaplain and a priest. And what we're doing is we're diving into people's stories in the midst of Central Appalachia, where so often people see us as monocultural. Everyone's the same. But my encounter has been quite the difference. I see a rich diversity of faith and no faith, and we're exploring personal stories of how faith and values play out in a person's life. I want to give a special thanks to Kentucky Humanities, the National Endowment for Humanities, our grant sponsor. And today I'm really excited because I have a special guest with us, a person who I love and admire, who I believe really brings a unique spin, but really compassion. I don't want to call him a prodigal son because that's part of his great writing work. But Devin is with us. Devin, would you be willing to tell us a little bit about you? You've had kind of an eclectic life.
Absolutely. Age does not necessarily determine wisdom, but after 41 years and traveling across the country, I've had some experiences.
Yeah, you sure have. You're one of the unique guys who has been to Las Vegas for college athletics, and you were a bowler, right?
In Las Vegas, and I had the lowest average on the entire team, and it cracked me up.
Okay, well, someone had to start at the bottom, right? So you were a bowler, but then actually your sport that you're really into was martial arts.
It was, and I started out very, very poor. As a matter of fact, my instructor told me I had to go somewhere else. I ended up actually teaching his class through hard work and things of that nature. To offer 1/3 experience, Rob, if you don't mind, I ended up in a Master's of Fine Arts writing degree, and I barely got by because my story was not great. It was the worst story, but they knew I wanted to learn. So,
I think that's incredible. So the love of writing, the love of thinking, exploring deep questions, but really wanting our world to be really compassionate, right?
yes, when you travel the world and you experiences and you know that you are going to fail, the key thing, it's just to get back up and take a step.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You know, there's a real depth of that in that statement. So I know when we think about like spiritual journeys, that can mean a host of things. I mean, for some people, they're going to shave their heads and join a Buddhist temple. Others are going to get saved and be a Pentecostal preacher. But like when I use that broad term spiritual journey, what's that been like for you?
First of all, if you are open-minded to study Western religious text and what you can learn from Buddhism and Hinduism, every culture has a flood myth. You don't want to take it from me? Look it up. In each faith, there are people who have experienced self-sacrifice, Jesus Christ, Saint Mary, etc. So a spiritual journey you can learn from the masters. Now, there is also a component of trauma in this area. It originates all the way back to colonialism and our Native Americans. What you can do with that is suffer. Suffering will forge you into an empathic person.
What a powerful line. You know, that suffering kind of forms you into being an empath or an empathic person. And would you say that it's out of suffering that you have kind of grown into this deep compassion?
It is due to suffering, but if I may share an intimate weakness of mine, due to the fact that we really are trying to share public information in an honest manner. Number one, you are burdened with bipolar. Bipolar is the most severe mood disorder. You can qualify for SSI based on just that. How did it radically impact my life? Once I understood what my condition was and I had a proper medication regimen, a proper support network, I did not act on that.
Well, can I ask you a question about that, Devin? So you told us you're 41 now, but when was it that you learned that bipolar was a part of your life? About how old were you when you learned that?
Bipolar, if a parent will take the time to notice the seeds of bipolar, they are impactful. However, regardless of whether it's genetic or experience based, around 30 or 32 to 35, it catalyzes. You can become very violent, you can become suicidal, you can, etc. So that completely, I don't want to say made me, I don't want to say that, but I did not follow the necessary steps that were critical, mandatory, and that impacted everything. That's why I'm back in Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah, because so you went off to a great MFA program, and like you say, you were working your tail off, and you're just like hungry to learn, and you're doing it, and then did you have some kind of like bipolar episode that kind of turned things on its
Tons
head?
and tons and tons. I have
Okay.
lived in Lexington, Kentucky. I have lived in Frankfurt. I have spent time in Las Vegas. The MFA was in the state of Washington.
Okay, way across the country. Yeah.
But in each case, I did not follow through.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that when people have these episodes or they get diagnosed, then it's like, okay, let's get you on a proper med regimen. Here are the things you're going to do. But what I have noticed and what I've heard from a lot of people is that's really hard to do. Follow those protocols, follow those things, because you start feeling better and you're like, okay, I don't need to do this and all that. And was that the kind of the case for you?
Yes, absolutely. The practices of religion, without going too in depth, practice some sort of action, whether it be meditation, whether it be suffering, whether it be a self imposed condition. Take a look. Now, what I have tried to do and thus far have struggled immensely, you will fall. Getting back up is much, much, much more difficult. Words cannot properly explain this process. Only the journey. It's not just about getting back up. You have to take a proper step forward.
Okay, yeah, so it's really about it's kind of this mystical in some ways, right? It's like what the universe is doing, but also what you have to do to kind of for your own. And I know that when people oftentimes talk about their faith journey or their spiritual journey, they can make it seem so simple. It's like, I prayed and God opened the sky and God answered my prayers and now I'm doing backflips and I lost 40 pounds
Reductive.
and yeah, very reductive, right? But that sounds like that hasn't been the case for you. It's not been so simple and easy.
No. One good example is dogmatic faith, in which religions, and pardon me, but our faiths in Central Appalachia have stuck precisely to the Holy Bible without any. As a matter of fact, when I tried to study other faiths and meditation, they say that let the devil in. Now, if you only stick to learning one thing and one thing only, you are limited. Eastern religions have been doing this for a really long time. Learn. It's okay to come back to your home base. That's fine. However, learn.
Yeah. So really, like, there's so you present like kind of two clear paths, right? Like there's the path of openness and learning, and then there's this path of, man, if you explore anything else, you're letting the devil in, and you're like giving yourself and the demons, and what you're saying is life's not that black and white. It's really very different than that, right? It's kind of opening it up to learning. And so when you have been journeying over these years now with kind of living in a world where bipolar is a reality for you, like let's say when you've tried to be really religious, when you've tried to go to church or something like that, what's that been like for you?
Traumatic, because Central Appalachia gets one thing flat wrong. And I am not apologetic if you are offended, because the truth is often hard. Central Appalachia, the core of it is to become a God-fearing man. This God will only give you what you can handle? No. Could Jesus Christ handle what was in front of him? You may think he could have. I don't want to get into an argument about whether or not he could have. However, we pray because we say, please give us the strength. Do not be a God-fearing man. Be a God-loving man. And that is why these individuals, these masters, they never, ever, 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 look it up, they never preach fear, except here.
Yeah, so now this kind of fear-based religion can really, and I want to use the words you said earlier, I think was very powerful, can become kind of a trauma, right? And when you're already, let's say, a little bit more, like your mind is not as steadied sometimes, and you get a lot of this fear-based stuff, does that cause you to kind of retreat back into yourself, or what does it cause you to do?
Yes, it does. Here are some key elements about any mental disorder or condition. First, this is a difficult one, but not impossible. It is part of discovering an awareness, and you don't have to know exactly what it is. You only have to see a behavior that is very opposite. If you have a very, very mellow individual and suddenly he becomes violent, act on that. Consult a mental health professional. What is difficult, you may not get it right on the first time. However, you must strive. You must not give up. People are terrified of medication. The worst that can happen is if you take a medication and it's not right for you, cease. Now, with severe disorders, you must, this is especially true for bipolar, you must have a support network. The optimal number is 5. Why am I stressing this? It's because you can't do it alone. And that was the chief mistake I made. I have communicated with you many, 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 many times. Even if you only have a best friend that doesn't judge you, that tries to help you, friendship, compassion. I've got a friend that says, I'm always in your corner. Something that's beneficial.
That's a really powerful kind of idea. Devin, you talked about earlier. You were mentioning kind of one of those taglines that a lot of people say about being a God-fearing man and all that. Another one of the lines that people often use is they say, "Now, brother, God helps those who help themselves." What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, I would like to elaborate on being a slight amount of verbose. However, that is necessary when you are discussing the most severe mental mood disorder there is. Anything else I would want to share, use resources available to you. Small victories, and I know this is very, 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 very difficult, are very key. I mentioned earlier that flood myths, you can find them all over the place, everywhere. Now, whether or not they're true, whether or not it doesn't matter. Psychological reality can be very powerful. Now, a small victory can include anything regardless of time spent as long as you progress. Now, here's the trick. When you walk up a set of stairs, yeah, some people walk 2 steps. That's not important. You must progress. If it's not one day at a time, if you can't do a week, do a day. If you can't, but you must progress. You can't take 60 seconds at a time because you must push and exceed, even if they are small victories, which are necessary. You cannot go from nothing to everything at once.
Yes, I mean, so you got to really start with this small kind of stuff, right? And and in your life right now, as you're journeying in this 41st year of your life, what would you say right now is kind of giving you purpose and meaning right now?
Purpose and meaning. I have experienced what I personally believe were, people love the term signs, they love the term holy, and I'm not saying that's a bad name or a bad word, but I have personally experienced what I wish to call spiritual experiences. Now, this is really tough for me to admit, but I turned my back on those. My job, I was told to become a light for the world, but don't put the light in the box. Rob, you are a light for the world. It just means, sometimes it's called witnessing, sometimes it's called etc. Follow the path that you have selected. Do not shun your path. You cannot progress to more experiences that you value the most in the world if you merely fall, stand up, and frankly, scare you. You must I don't particularly like the phrase "get out of your comfort zone" because I don't particularly like the phrases that are cliche. They put labels on people, and every person is different. They box people in.
And that's not something you like, is being boxed, or you just don't think it's healthy for people to get boxed in, right? And so this call to be a light, right? It's kind of like you feel like that's kind of part of your call, right? Is to kind of bring, and how do you feel right now as you journey in this part of your life? Where do you feel like that light, you're being asked to kind of make that light known?
Right now, we are being a light. We are being compassionate. This is in the spirit of progressing forward. If you look at what are sometimes termed as the masters of life, it goes from Hindu, it goes all the way back to tribal. You can learn from this. And I want to share with you fear will temper you. You will never progress unless you experience uncomfortability.
Mm,
How else could you? I have failed. Failure is how you learn.
mm.
If you stick with what you have been doing your entire life, you will not take a step forward.
Yeah, and like you say, it's really kind of the small steps, one step at a time. And for people in their spiritual journeys, oftentimes there are like rituals or practices or things that people do to kind of help them. Whether it's I go in the woods every day with my dog and I pray, or I read my Bible or something like that. Are there any like practices that you find yourself that are helpful for you?
Absolutely. Do not remain static. What I mean by that is do not pursue one tone and one tone only. It is necessary to learn about different disciplines and different faiths. I cannot remember whom it was, but he was a master of life. For please, please, please forgive me for a paraphrase that is not equal. The gentleman said, "Your Christianity I like. Your Christians not so much." Now that was a long, 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 long time ago. What that means is follow your experience. You don't necessarily have to turn your faith away from your practices. You simply have to learn what you can learn from this world. You do not have to adopt your practices. Here is one thing. Do what works for you. If it does not, whether you're ready for the information or you're not, it doesn't matter. Discard it.
Okay, that is freeing in lots of ways, right? The notion of, and if you try something and you feel like you need to fit into this certain thing and that doesn't work for you, then just discard it, right? Kind of, if they're trying to put you in a box and that doesn't work, then get out of the box, right? Um, and when would you say? Because that takes a huge amount of courage,
Yes, it does.
right? And when would you say you were able to say, okay, these certain things aren't working for me, I just need to get out of it? When did that occur for you?
I was raised in an old, regular Baptist environment. I do not wish to state negative comments, but Old regular Baptists are strict. They do adhere to practices that have history. With being diplomatic, I learned a lot. Without getting into my personal policies, once I decided to quit the fear, I began to just try other sects. Was I fear? Or did I? Oh, yeah. My legs shook in the pews. My hands sweat. I went because so and so said you might like this church. Doesn't matter what it was. It's just about, and it does not have to be a huge leap. What you must do is go forward, like steps. You must go forward.
Yeah, and I guess, as we're thinking about wrapping up, Devin, one of the questions, and just because I have you here, I would love to see what your thoughts are on this. You know, if a person is attempting a spiritual journey, or they're like leading a spiritual community, let's say they're the imam or the monk or the priest or whatever it is, and they have people in their community who have been diagnosed with a type of bipolar condition, what advice would you have on how to love, support, care for somebody who's been diagnosed?
In the context of spirituality, regardless of your faith, when you feel an experience that touches you, it does not necessarily have to be an angel visitation. It does not necessarily have to have a label. Simply let that spirit enter you, learn from it, progress. Do not shun your message. Do not try to cage a dove or an eagle. Do not turn your back upon light.
Don't turn your back on light. That's a beautiful, beautiful line. And now in your 41st year, is there any kind of religious or spiritual community you find yourself connecting to now?
Yes, I do not wish to label these sects because a lot of times people just hear a word, they knock it out. For me, journeys that involved suffering but also offered a component of transformation. I will give you one journey that worked for me.
Okay.
Jonah and the whale did impact me very much. It is a story of entering a place of severe uncomfortability. You can also compare it to many other journeys, but in the end, he came out. And even if I'm getting some of the details wrong, he was tempered. You do not become tempered with empathy until you suffer and you know what it is like. Sympathy is not empathy. Empathy is the truth.
Yeah. And in that kind of pulling on, that's a powerful image of Jonah and the fish, Jonah and the whale, and like Jonah goes into a period of darkness and is thrust out towards the light and has to step towards light. And that's really what you've been sharing, right? It's like one small step toward the light, being the light, and in that almost like a womb process, right? The womb of suffering, right?
I started to say that, but I did not wish to go into a strictly gender bound or label based, but that is exactly true. Not only did he forge himself of empathy, if you wish to study spiritual Christianity, please learn from the apostles. Particularly, well, I do not want to offer an apostle that is superior to others. You will find wisdom. Please learn from these individuals who I am calling masters of life. Masters, they suffered tremendously. And on the other side, they learned the journey of life.
Well, I count it a privilege to be able to walk in life with you, Devin, and sit on your porch today and hang out a little bit. As we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share with us?
If a statement, or even with Christianity, with Buddhism, with Hinduism, with Taoism, with anything, if those statements do not work for you at the time, please don't view them as statements that you are not ready to hear. That will adhere to discarding. Instead, take what works for you. And then please do not discard it as uselessness. Take what works for you purely.
Well, great. Those are great, solid words, Devin. Hey, man, I appreciate your time, brother, and thanks for being on our podcast.
I appreciate your opportunity. It is very, very, very rare to speak about holistic faith that still, I really hope I've reached people who can experience Christianity while still
Jesus,
learning,
please don't be mad.
but not adhering strictly from other people.
I know
Okay,
that
thank you.
it makes you sad when I simply don't know